Election 2002, The Debates, is underwritten by AARP, the nation's leading organization for persons over 50, with more than 370,000 members in Arkansas.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the sixth and final debate in our coverage of Election 2002, except tonight's broadcast will not feature a debate. Our purpose was to arrange a meeting of the two candidates for Congress in the 1st District, Representative Marion Berry and former Representative Tommy Robinson. However, repeated efforts to accommodate Mr. Berry's schedule were not successful. Under the rules of our coverage, which were made known to all candidates early in the season, we will proceed with Mr. Robinson only. Joining us here in the Donald W. Reynolds Performance Center at the University of Central Arkansas at Conway, our panel of journalists, Larry Binns of the Stuttgart Daily Leader, Eric Francis of the North Little Rock Times, and Paul Holmes of the Jonesboro Sun. Mr. Robinson, thank you for joining us this evening. The questioning will begin tonight with Mr. Binns following a 2-minute opening statement by the candidates. Mr. Robinson?
I'm Tommy Robinson. First, I would like to thank the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, AETN, AARP of Arkansas, and the UCA. I started my college career on this campus many years ago when it was Arkansas State Teachers College, and I'm not going into the grades I made the first semester. But I completed my freshman, sophomore, and part of my junior year here before I moved on to the University of Arkansas system to finish my undergraduate work and pursue my graduate studies. I am very excited being on this campus. I almost got lost. I could not believe the growth. I think when I was here, they had a couple of thousand students. Now it's almost 9,000, and a new president, Lou Hardin, a man of wisdom, vision, and a good, honest man that will carry this university forward. It should not come as any surprise to anyone here that my opponent has not shown up tonight. I agreed to tape this debate on a Sunday, a Monday, a Tuesday. He's not working in Congress today. He has not shown up for one single public forum throughout this race because he knows he cannot face the voters or the media because of his voting record. This man has been missing for 6 years. He qualifies to have his picture on a milk carton as a missing person. The average person in this district could not pick him out of a police lineup because they don't know him. He only caters to the rich. He has sold the heart and soul of this district to labor unions, trial lawyers, big ag companies, greedy corporate executives, and quite frankly, he doesn't care about us. By his own financial statements, he lives in a mansion in Washington, D.C. He is heavily invested on Wall Street. While most of us, like the Robinson family in this district that are farmers, we have been knocked to our knees financially. We asked him to come help us, but he couldn't do it. He flew to Florida to meet with peanut farmers. He flew to Montana to meet with sheep farmers, but he can't come on this great campus and let the voters ask him and the media questions about why he should be reelected.
Mr. Robinson, thank you for your opening statement. Questioning begins now, Mr. Binns.
Since my background in the last 20 years went more in agriculture journalism, I want to focus on those subjects, and these other folks can talk about other issues. How do you explain to the urban public why the Farm Bill exists with subsidies, why it'll have to continue that way, and why really the USDA budget in terms of production agriculture is only a small segment of the entire USDA budget? How do you explain to them why we have to have the subsidies we have in agriculture?
Well, Mr. Binns, that is a very good question. First, let me explain this. The total agriculture budget is only 1.4% of the total overall federal budget. Unfortunately, the farmers get very little out of the Farm Bill. Most of the money goes to big ag corporations like Riceland Food in Stuttgart, Archer Daniels Midland. Then you have food stamps, then you have the Women and Infant Children Program. Then you have all these other programs, U.S. Forest Service. The farmers are not getting very much out of this. Our family sold our rice yesterday for $2.70 a bushel, and that was with the loan payment that you get from the government. It cost us $2.75 to grow that rice. My friends are all broke right now. We're all struggling. We're trying to make it one more year without the help of a congressman. He brags about this farm bill. This is absolutely the worst farm bill that I have ever witnessed in my life. I was there when we wrote the 85 and 90 farm bill. We made money on those farm bills because we required farmers to lay out part of their production, and we paid them for it. We're now planting fence row to fence row. We're oversupplying the world with grain, which is causing the prices to be depressed for the farmers. Something has got to change. If we lose the family farms, we're going to lose cities like Brinkley, where I live. Our whole economy is based on farm income. We don't have industry. So it has a direct impact on everyone living in the first district because agriculture is, in this district, the #1 industry.
Mr. Francis.
Mr. Robinson, the government in Washington is currently embroiled in the debate over what to do about Iraq. This morning, was reported that apparently North Korea has been developing nuclear weapons and is withdrawing from the requirements of treaties signed with the Clinton administration previously. How do you feel the United States should approach Iraq and Saddam Hussein? And how do you feel, in light of the new information about Korea, the United States should approach its relationship with Korea?
Well, first of all, let me share with you my background with Saddam Hussein. Well, a member of the Armed Services Committee, I was sent over there to deal with Saddam Hussein in Baghdad, Iraq, over the then Persian Gulf crisis. I have met a lot of tough people and thugs in my life in law enforcement, but he is absolutely the most ruthless man that I've ever been around in my life. And in fact, he didn't like me from the start. He said, I don't like your attitude. I hate the United States of America. But to answer your question, he's got to go. In my mind, he is an evil person. He kills his own people with biological weapons. I think we have to take him out. Very concerned about North Korea. I mean, we fought one war over there and I hope we never fight another one. But we're going to have to put pressure on the North Koreans. We cannot afford, and we'd be ill-advised to stand by and let Saddam continue or let the North Koreans continue with their nuclear program.
Next question, Mr. Holmes.
Perhaps just to follow up on that a little bit, do you think the United States has the coalition in place to mount an attack against Iraq? And if so, is it inevitable? Is it absolutely necessary? Is that regime any worse than any other repressive regime you could probably name rather quickly?
I don't think we'll get the ideal coalition. Of course, the British are always on our side. I don't think the French and the Germans right now, because of their own politics, will support us. Of course, we'll have Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. I think we're going to have to go in there. I would prefer a surgical strike. We know where he is every day. My problem with it is one who has been in Baghdad. I hate to think that our young men and women would have to fight a street war in downtown Baghdad. Just because of the makeup of the city, we would lose a lot of people. I think we go ahead and take him out. And I think it can be done. I think Mr. Bush is pursuing the right course. Politically right now in the Senate and the House, they're playing hardball politics with the president. And I get livid every time I see Tom Daschle bashing the president. I served in the House with him. He was very ineffective then. He's been running for something ever since I've known him. But the president has the authority now to move forward and to hopefully take Saddam out. If it takes an invasion, we will invade.
Mr. Benson Stuttgart.
You spoke of low prices in agriculture commodities, but at the same time you told me earlier today that you're against resumption of trade with Cuba, even though it seems to be the predominant thought in Washington. They would like to continue that, resume that trade agreement they had 40 years ago and brought to an end with the missile crisis. Now, why are you opposed to resuming trade with Cuba?
First of all, I'm old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I'm thankful to President Kennedy for stopping what could have been a nuclear holocaust for all of us. When you have a country that their top automobile is a 58 Edsel, they don't have any money. The only people who are going to benefit from trade with Cuba, Larry, is rice and food in Stuttgart. They will make money off of low prices to farmers and get government subsidies to sell rice to Cuba or under the PL 480 Food for Peace program. I just think that we should not alter our foreign policy. Castro is a communist. He's not going to change. And I think we have to stay the course and let the world know that we don't back down from what we stand for in this great country.
Mr. Francis?
With the current concentration on protecting the American public from terrorism, it's clear that in addition to our full-time military, the National Guard will hold a big role there. Arkansas has many guardsmen and guardswomen among its people. What can you do as a representative in Washington to help bring in more money and programs for our National Guard units in Arkansas?
First of all, I said I served in the Armed Services Committee. I fought very hard for funding for Little Rock Air Force Base, our National Guard armories. But here's the basic problem of terrorism, what really concerns me. When I was sheriff in Little Rock and we had a rash of killings in convenience stores, people robbing female clerks, calling it putting your eyes out, we put deputies in the back room with instructions to kill the armed robber. We didn't have a robber in 4 years because the threat of being killed was the deterrent. But with terrorists, they want to die. So we're going to have to take a totally different approach. I think the president is right. We have to go out and find them cell by cell, get rid of them cell by cell, get rid of the Saddam Husseins, and get a coalition that will track and hunt down people that murder innocent people.
From the Jonesboro Sun, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson, you said previously you've favored a 5% across the board cut in spending to pay for a 5% tax cut. And if so, how would you finance this overall war on terrorism and a specific war against Iraq? And if you do that, how you finance it and what programs, other programs of the government might be cut?
Well, first, I think you were talking about the Demo Gazette questionnaire. I said that we would probably have to tolerate a deficit up to probably $150 billion. But here's a problem I have right now. The last figures I saw on the national debt was like $6.233 trillion. Every human being in the United States owes about $21,000. The interest on that debt is $350 billion this year. I don't know how we're going to pay for it, but I know this. If we don't stop the terrorist attack and we have another attack like we had on 9/11, then our economy will go further into a tailspin and we'll never recover. So I think whatever it takes, I'm not for raising people's taxes. I think in the Robinson family, we pay enough taxes. But I don't know what the total answer is until I see what the cost is going to be. I'm for cutting government to keep from reinstating the tax cuts that were given to us. But I don't think no one knows until we see the depth and magnitude of what we have to do with Saddam Hussein.
Mr. Benz?
Well, you say that earlier that agriculture is such a strong part of our economy in Arkansas, but we have such a drain in eastern Arkansas with so many small towns that are going broke, and with this tax issue coming up in the state level, it could wipe out some of the services on the public level. How do you feel about, I know you say you're opposed to taxing, but at the same time, you have to maintain services for the public, and we got some very serious problems in the eastern half of the state where it's so poverty, the unemployment is very high and so forth.
Even though it's not a federal issue, if we repeal the tax on groceries and other things, in Brinkley alone, we don't have enough police officers to patrol the street. We have a volunteer fire department. We're not a very wealthy city. I don't know what we're going to do. I think that people will pay taxes and a tax increase if you lay out why you need the money. But I think there's an anti-tax sentiment. On the other hand, because people see wasted services. They see bloated cities and counties. But in eastern Arkansas, we're a different demographics. We have some socioeconomic problems over there that other people don't understand. But Larry, you're right. I mean, I don't have all the answers. I'm going to work hard to see that our municipalities and county governments in the 26 counties get all the federal grants we can get. That's something we have not been getting. When you have a congressman like my opponent that makes the remarks like he does against our president, he can't even get his telephone calls returned from the White House. And it brings me to the point. Ronald Reagan once told me in the White House, "You're the best Republican I have in the House." I never had the nerve to tell him as a Democrat, you can't play partisan politics. We've got, in a district like the 1st, we've got to have a relationship with the White House to get all the federal help we can get.
Mr. Francis?
Mr. Robinson, perhaps the most divisive issue in politics over the last 2 decades has been abortion. What is your personal stance on abortion, and how would you vote if a federal bill came up to completely ban abortion, to ban it with an exception for the life and health of the mother and cases of rape and incest, and a bill to reaffirm the rights established in Roe v. Wade?
Well, I've always had a pro-life voting record. I'm only for abortions in case of rape, incest, or if the mother's life was threatened. I would not change my position. I mean, I've locked into this position for a long time. It's a very touchy subject. I'm not a female. I'll never have to face that decision. And sometimes I wonder why politicians think that they have to state a position on it. I know it's a federal issue, but I'm not going to change my voting record. I mean, I'm 60 years old. I mean, I'm just not going to do that. I feel strongly about my religious convictions on the issue, but other people don't feel that way, and I respect their positions.
Mr. Holmes.
An issue that's gotten a lot of attention lately in the district is the cost of prescription drugs, particularly for the elderly. I think your opponent has said he believes the prices are higher in the United States than in Canada and Mexico because of the drug companies. Do you share that belief?
Well, first of all, it's a serious problem. Let me share my opponent's voting record on those two issues. In 2000, there was a vote in Congress to set aside $40 billion for a prescription drug plan, a starting point, something to build on. He voted no. 2001, there was a bill that would have prohibited the Federal Drug Administration from enforcing the reimportation of drugs coming back into this country. He voted no. That's the only issue he's had in 6 years, and he's failed miserably on it. I want to go up and work in a bipartisan way. There are some good things in the Republican bill. There's some good things in the Democratic bill. We've got to start building partnerships and stop this partisanship. My 84-year-old mother, when I decided to run for Congress, she said, "Thomas Franklin, are you a Democrat this time or a Republican?" I said, "Well, Mother, what difference does it make?" She said, "I don't like either party. Every election year, they promise me prescription drugs. They promise me they're going to protect Social Security, and it's just all talk." I'm for lowering the cost of drugs. I mean, I have no retirement. My wife and I on our Blue Cross Blue Shield policy is $984 a month for two of us. I mean, I'm going to be approaching 65 pretty soon where I will need Medicare, Social Security. I don't guess I've stayed in a job long enough to get a retirement. But we've got to do something. There are a lot of senior citizens out there that are hurting. They do without food. They don't have any entertainment because they have to pay $300 and $400 a month. And I'm going to work very hard, not just during an election cycle, but I'm going to go up there and I'm going to vote right and not come back home and say I'm for something and vote against it in D.C.
Mr. Benz.
Having lived in Helena and now Stuttgart the second time around, I can tell that we get a lot of racial friction over when people come to court for various crimes that they're arrested for it. They say it's heavily weighted, more blacks are brought to trial, and it appears that it's a racial matter more than a criminal matter. Now, being a law enforcement man all these years, how do you look upon a situation where I can count the heads when I see it at circuit court? There's maybe 8 blacks, 2 whites, and I say, are they not arresting enough whites? Are they really just picking out the black people in the community? Because I hear that so often in the last 8 or 9 years. So what's your feeling on that?
Well, enforcement of the law and justice is supposed to be blind. I got in a lot of trouble in Pulaski County because I was accused of arresting too many white people and not enough African Americans and other minorities. As one who served up until July as vice chairman of the state parole board, I went into a lot of penitentiaries, and I'll just sum it up by saying this. I probably let out on a ratio of 10 to 1 African Americans over whites because most of them were from very poor families. They had no money for an attorney. They had a public defender if they were lucky to get one. There is a lot more crime in the minority communities because of the socioeconomic conditions they have there. It's no secret there are more crack cocaine in black communities than there are whites, but that's spreading across the spectrum. I think one of the problems with crime in the minority community is we've got to lift them up. We've got to better educate them. We've got to try and help the families that are single-parent families do a better job as a government to assist those people. I don't think law enforcement officers, and I was one for a long time, intentionally get up one morning and say, I'm going to go out and arrest 8 blacks and only 1 white. I think they're called more often to the minority communities, because in the white communities, a lot of times families try to take care of their problems internally. You have 2 parents in the family. Most of the single females that are minority, they don't have the wherewithal to handle a young man on drugs. So they call the police more, and I think that's why you see more of them incarcerated.
Mr. Francis.
Mr. Robinson, the people of the state of Arkansas are being asked this election year to consider an initiated act that would create a felony category for certain types of animal cruelty, extreme cases. Since your district, like much of the state, has a great number of hunters, a great number of farmers who've expressed concern over this, what's your opinion of that initiated act? And also, what would you think of a federal law that would specifically make illegal cockfighting and dogfighting?
Well, the last time I looked, we had laws on the books to cover cockfighting. I'm not familiar with the federal statutes that they've changed, but on the state we do. And I heard the most ridiculous ad driving up here today. Oh, we got roosters that they strap razor blades on, you know, like it was, it's wrong, but, you know, I'm not going to be for a law like that. I mean, the next thing you know, if I shoot a duck on the water instead of letting him fly, I'm going to be charged with a felony. I mean, I'm a hunter, I'm a farmer, I try to be a good steward of the land, good conservation, but I think the law is ridiculous. I think it's a bunch of radical people that believe so strongly in their cause that they can't see the forest for the trees.
Mr. Holmes?
I wanted to follow up a little more on the prescription drug issue. The Republican plan, which obviously didn't get enacted, nor did the Democratic plan for that matter, perhaps would allow private companies to dictate prices. Do you think that was a major point in the reason that it was not approved, or that no bill at all was approved? And who should dictate the prices? Should the government get into that, or should that be the private companies?
First of all, as I said, there are good points in the Republican bill and there are good points in the Democratic bill. The one part in the Republican bill I don't like is I don't want private insurers controlling that. I want it to be administered by Medicare. The problem is the Democrats loaded their bill up like a Christmas tree with too much money. They knew it wouldn't pass. There's not enough money in the budget with the threat of war in Iraq and the war on terrorism. I think the Republicans had about the right amount of money. I just want us to get together and quit playing the partisanship and say, look, every election cycle, and I can go back in my memory, the last 8 or 10, the Democrats get up a phone bank, call all the senior citizens and say, Republicans are going to take away your Social Security, which is absolutely ridiculous. No member of Congress that I know would ever vote, or he wouldn't stay in office. I think we've got to reach a compromise. I think we need to lower the amount that the Democrat has in their bill, take out the Republican bill that private insurers will administer the program, let Medicare do it. And I think one of the problems, if you really look at this, and I have at great length, we require our drug companies to do research for such a long period of time, sometimes 10 and 12 years before a drug can be brought onto the market. That cost is going to be passed on. And I think we've got to look and try to speed up the research part of it and get these drugs out to the consumers quicker. But another thing about reimporting drugs that bothered me, you know, the Clinton administration would not implement the law. It was not George Bush, as Marion Berry has said. There is a safety concern there, especially with the threat of terrorism. We don't have any control over if someone tampers with that pill in Canada when it's reimported back into this country. So I think there are a lot of issues involved. Price, safety, quality control. But I think if we work together, we can come up with a bill that will benefit the citizens of this country and stop playing politics with it.
Mr. Benz?
Kind of two parts of question here. Medicaid and nursing homes, they tie together because so much of the folks in nursing homes are there because of Medicaid, it's Medicare. I'm asking you this, and I see this in some nursing homes in eastern Arkansas, that they're short of help, they seem to be understaffed, they can't meet the needs of the people. And we're growing older in this country. We're going to have more and more people reaching the age where they may have to turn to those kind of facilities to live in. what's the outlook going to be down the road, you see, as far as how we're going to be able to continue funding and provide the care these folks need in the nursing homes?
Larry, that's a very good question. My mother's in Clay Cliff Nursing Home in Brinkley. Very dependent on Medicaid and Medicare. We're not a wealthy family. I don't know, I couldn't today if Billy Clay, the nursing home administrator, said, Tommy, you've got to start paying $300 a month on your mother's bill. I couldn't pay it until the farming crisis turns around. I think we have an obligation to our senior citizens to always have a helping hand for them. They've built this great country. I think we're going to have to just roll up our sleeves. Again, I hate to just keep making this point. We've got to quit the partisan infighting in Congress. It just makes me sick when I see the rhetoric coming out of there. Nobody really wants to do the job. It's all one-upsmanship. Who can get the best 30-second soundbite? I'm willing to go up there and do what I can from my own personal experience. Knowing the way I've lived my life, I'll probably end up in a nursing home. But I want to take care of my mother too. And I know I can't right now. Maybe it'll turn around and I'll get $10 soybeans. Maybe I can, but at this point in time, it's not just the Robinson family, it's every family that is being faced with this. And people don't have money in this district. You know, there are some bright spots in Jonesboro and other places, but by and large, we're a very poor district. No one has that kind of money in their pocket to pay for Medicaid cuts. But it's been politicized too. Every negative ad I see in the Senate race is something about that. And you know, we shouldn't be playing with people's lives. We shouldn't be playing politics. We should be finding solutions. They deserve better than what they're getting, the people in nursing homes, out of their politicians.
The federal government has in the past resorted to base closures to help cut budgets. The Eaker Air Force Base in Blytheville was one of the Arkansas casualties there. What would you do in Congress to make sure that other major military installations in Arkansas, the Little Rock Air Force Base, Fort Chaffee, the Arsenal at Pine Bluff, did not become victims and cost many Arkansans their jobs?
First place, you have to have a relationship with the White House. I got more C-130s than anybody in the world as a Democrat because I voted right with Ronald Reagan. Speaking of Eaker Air Force Base, and Bill Alexander and I were friends. We didn't agree on foreign policy issues, but I talked to Congressman Alexander till I was out of breath. Quit bashing the White House. We lost that base because of politics. I'm going to always stand up and do what's right, but I'm also going to have a relationship with the White House and the Secretary of Defense, and you don't get things when you trash them every day. My opponent in this race made a statement in Little Rock. No Republican president has ever done anything significant for this country. He bashes this administration. It would be like me saying John F. Kennedy never did anything, or Franklin Roosevelt. I will work hard. I know how the Defense Department operates. I know how to get the money. All I can do is go up there and be a good little boy and vote right and not trash people and work to shore up our military. We need to do something with Eaker Air Force Base. I mean, it's tragic. I helped Bill get a lot of money for buildings up there. And he helped me on the Appropriations Committee. But the tragedy of it was he just didn't understand that Contra funding and MX missiles and SDI were very partial to President Reagan. And rightfully so. We won the Cold War. He was right. The Democrats were wrong.
Paul Holmes.
On the issue of Social Security, do you favor allowing workers to invest a portion of their Social Security payroll taxes privately? And if they do it in the stock market, what's to prevent them from losing that portion of the investment? Should there be a safety net?
Well, until we had Enron and WorldCom and the accounting scandals, philosophically I was for that. But I was also for if they invest some and lose the money, we're not going to make it up for them. I don't think pragmatically now that will ever happen. I think it's unfortunate because many young people don't live past the next year or the next year, and they don't think they're going to get any money when they retire, and they want another investment. But I don't think, in good conscience now, after what I've witnessed, what some of these corporate executives have done with people's 401k plans, I couldn't be for that now. In theory, it sounds good. Philosophically, I could agree with it, but pragmatically, it won't work.
Mr. Benz.
Gun control. What's your thoughts about that? We have these environmental groups and PETA and what have you that would like to see firearms taken out of the hands of hunters, and actually the animal cruelty bill, there's some concern also about it taking hunting and fishing altogether away from us. So this permeates nationally. It's not just a local state issue, it's a national concern right now. So what's your feel for that if you face a vote up there on that?
Well, I'm 100% NRA. Second Amendment has no loopholes. I remember I debated in New Jersey, I think on CNN with the police chief. And I shared with him, if you didn't have a gun when you came into New Jersey, they ought to give you one. I'm not moving my position on guns. You know, I believe in the Second Amendment. I'm going to support the right of people to bear arms. It's a constitutional right. You shouldn't have to go get a permit. Our founding fathers gave us that right. So I'm pretty strong NRA. I belong to the NRA. Probably belong to the NRA until I die.
Mr. Francis.
The forestry industry in America is fairly well under siege. There are cheap logs and timber products coming in from Canada and overseas. Prices for locally, domestically produced timber have been dropping. It makes it very difficult, not only for the large timber corporations, but small independent tree farmers in the state of Arkansas to really get their investment back out of their land. What would you do to help the local family forester in the state of Arkansas?
First of all, they have major problems. Cheap imports. We're going to have to do something about the tariffs on that, just like the president did on steel. Another real problem we have in eastern Arkansas, we've cleared most of our good hardwood trees. Now we're getting second, third quality hardwood trees. I think we're going to have to look at it. It's a commodity. We may have to work with these people for a few years and subsidize some of their losses because it's a very important commodity, just like soybeans, rice, or anything else. And I will support any effort to shore up, like in Clarendon, Arkansas, my friend TNS Sawmill, they're struggling now. They create a lot of jobs, and we cannot overlook that industry.
Mr. Holmes.
Mr. Robinson, you had said earlier that around Brinkley where you live, we don't have industry, rely on farming. Are there some specific things that you would propose in terms of industrial recruitment incentives, economic development incentives, job training, any of those sorts of things you think could help the Delta bring those jobs in?
First thing, I served on the Education Committee in Congress for 6 years and worked very hard getting money back into this state with no strings attached. We've got to make sure, like Crowley's Ridge Technical College in Forrest City, we keep the doors open. We've got to get a trainable workforce. One of the main reasons why people don't come to the Delta is we don't have people that are trainable. We've got to improve our education system. We've got to make sure that people understand that big corporations looking at a site. Thankfully in Brinkley, we have good public schools now. We have a tough superintendent, principal. You can't wear your hat on backwards, and you've got to come on campus and have an ID card, and you've got to learn. But we've got to clean up the drug problem too. It's sickening to me to see the young people that are spaced out on crack cocaine and drugs, and they're just living to see what they can steal. They don't want to work. We've got a lot of them still drawing crazy checks, and we've got to change that lifestyle. And that's why I hammered Mr. Berry so hard about spending the hundreds of thousands of dollars he has buying the black vote in eastern Arkansas. I've told all of them, Larry, you were in a church in Stuttgart, I won't give them one nickel. I want to help them, lift them up, and get out of this vicious cycle they're in. We've got to have better trained workers. We've got to work with the state. We got to work with all the federal people we can. And back again to the White House. The White House is very important. I knew the importance of Ronald Reagan, the Little Rock Air Force Base, and I was a Democrat, and I know the importance of George Bush sitting in the White House. You get them to make calls for you. You get extra money, you do things. But I'm going to work very hard for economic development because our young people are leaving the Delta. It's a shame you see your kids grow up and they move off because they can't get a good paying job except minimum wage.
Larry Benz.
I know we see that Middle East as a matter of petroleum and oil issue too, but in recent interviews with some businessmen in the Delta, they said this century, the 21st century, you're going to see wars over water because water is kind of taken for granted, but he says it's an issue that we see in our own country that there's shortages. And there was a recent article in the Memphis paper about farmers are draining all the water and they're getting rich from the rice. And I talked to you about that earlier, and you said that's been a kind of a jaded issue. I mean, it wasn't presented correctly. So what are your feelings about how we continue to have supplies of water? Because without water, we won't have towns. They'll go dry.
Let's take Stuttgart, Arkansas. Larry, you're very familiar with. My opponent has promoted the Grand Prairie Irrigation Project for one reason. It benefits rice and food. They want us to grow every acre of rice we can grow, because the cheaper we can give them rice, the more money they make. I am totally opposed to that. We start messing around with the White River, one of the few rivers we have that is unobstructed right now. Very important area for duck hunting, other activities, bird watching, fishing. I think we've got to cut back the amount of rice we grow. Then the farmers will get a good price for it. We keep growing every acre we can grow. The price keeps going down, going down. My grandfather, who I never knew because he died of a heat stroke in a rice field in Lone Oak, my mother tells me that they got more money for their rice 50 years ago than I'm getting today. The reason they didn't overproduce like we are. We've got to conserve our water table. You know, around Lone Oak, it's dropped to a level that's really scary. I don't know if we're going to be able to take care of urban development and the other industrial needs that we need in this district, but we've got to cut back on production and use of water. If the government has to pay higher subsidies to farmers not to grow rice, so be it. At least we'll lift them up too and lift our water table up.
Mr. Francis.
Immigration. Arkansas has a booming Latino population. We have people from different cultures coming in and starting businesses. Some of these immigrants are documented, some of them are illegal. What do you see as the steps that need to be taken at the federal level to either assist the immigrants who are coming in to become productive citizens of the United States, or better control immigration across our borders?
First of all, I think we got too many of them coming in. I've always been a hawk on immigration control. We need to stop the illegal immigration coming in this country. We don't have jobs for all of our people. And what bothers me talking about Medicaid, they now come in like to California and they qualify for Medicaid. Money that could be going to our citizens. I think we're going to have to get tough. I think that's one of the reasons we had 9/11. Our borders are too open. I think we're going to have to shore up the Immigration Naturalization Service, give more Border Patrol, put more Border Patrol agents on the border. We're going to have to get the military involved in patrolling the National Guard of the borders. I know when I was in Congress, one of the biggest fights I ever had was over amending Posse Comitatus to require the military to be involved in the war on drugs. The Pentagon fought that. I got it passed because I was a little bit meaner in the well of the House than they had their supporters doing. I think whatever it takes, we got to stop that. We must take care of America first and quit taking care of every other country first.
We go down to Mr. Holmes.
Mr. Robinson, I want to follow up a little bit on Larry's question in terms of groundwater. Would you favor groundwater regulation at either the federal or the state level, or a provision in a farm bill to provide incentives for taking land out of production and creating reservoirs?
I'm for all the above. I mean, you know, we're leaning toward regulation here. I have to go down every year and register my wells with the Conservation Service, pay a fee to have a well. I think they're easing into probably regulating the amount of water we can pump. But if we tie that with the federal government in the Farm Bill, giving farmers extra money for laying out their ground, and like I said about the 85 and 90 Farm Bill, I made money in the 85 and 90 Farm Bill because we were not planting fence row to fence row. We were not pumping millions of gallons of water out. I think we need reservoirs. I think we need to encourage farmers not to plant as much as they're planting irrigated ground. And if they would think about it, and think about when we had the layout requirements on their bases for corn and rice and all, they made money. They're not making money now. This freedom to farm, I called it freedom to fail in '96, was that. A total failure. We've got to learn a little bit about supply and demand. I learned that on the State Teachers College campus. in Econ 1 and 2, and I hated both subjects, but I did learn that about supply and demand. And we can't oversupply and oversupply. We're draining our water tables. We're causing low prices. If we have to regulate it, so be it. We need to regulate it.
Go to Mr. Benz.
Well, I guess we've been hearing this cliche level playing field for the last 10 years, and realistically, are we ever going to see the point where America will be in a level playing field with countries in the European Union and Latin America as far as exporting of grain and so forth?
No, it's not going to happen. It's never happened. They don't care about us, and I'm getting to the point where I don't really care about them. I think we're going to have to take care of America first, take care of our farmers that feed the world. We're just going to have to take some tough stance with the European Union. But what bothers me, we go places like down in Brazil and give them our technology and teach them how to grow soybeans, and they kill us on the world market. I mean, I want to help anyone. I've always been a big supporter of the PL 480 program, the Food for Peace program, which we feed needy people. But I'm not for going down and giving away all of our secrets and letting the Europeans subsidize and the French subsidize their crops when they don't want us to. I think this president understands the world economy better than a lot of people give him credit for. And I hope to be up there and explain to him as a real farmer. And, you know, I was thinking about this. My opponent said he wore out 3 shovels farming. We know he's not a real farmer. Any farmer out there knows 1 shovel's wore me out. You couldn't wear out 3 shovels if you wanted to. But I'm going to go up there and explain to him what the Robinson family goes through farming and why the big ag companies are getting all the benefits. They write the farm bill. Dick Bell has more influence with Marion Berry over the tens of thousands of dollars that he's given them. They benefit, we don't. I'm going to try to structure a debate on the House floor to make them understand, let's separate out big ag companies. Let's talk about farmers, what the French are doing to us with subsidies and all that. Sorry I went over the time.
Again from North Little Rock, Mr. Francis.
You've been in Washington before. You have an idea of what it is to be a representative in Congress. If you return, what committees would you ideally like to sit on, and what would be the first 2 bills you personally brought to the floor?
Well, I'm not going on the Appropriations Committee. I've heard more about appropriations and I'm sick in my stomach. First of all, the most important committee in Congress is the Rules Committee. Nothing comes to the floor without a rule. Decides who gets to add amendments and votes and all that. I don't want no rules. Some people might do say, what'd you do wrong? They put you on the Rules Committee. What I would like to do, if I'm elected, is to sit down with our delegation, which is very small, and say, look, there's no sense in us duplicating Mike Ross if he gets elected on agriculture. Let's sit down and see where we have gaps. Where do you think? I will get my seniority back. I'll be a 4th-term congressman. I haven't made a decision yet, other than I'm not going on appropriations. It's overrated. You've got to have an authorization to get an appropriation. I don't know why all the big stuff about that is and who gets millions and millions of dollars. If you do your job right, you have friends on the appropriation, like they've got friends on the authorization committee. They have to come to you and you go to them. I think the first law I'm going to pass is change the farm bill because it has such an impact on the people of this district. And you know, none of my friends have any money. I'm getting $25 checks in 15 in this campaign where normally I could get $1,000 from. They don't have any money. I think that's going to be the first law. The second one, I've got some ideas about some legislation to make the CIA, the FBI, the DEA, the NSA mandate that they cooperate with each other. It is sickening to me that one agency has information on terrorism and will not share it with the other one. If we haven't solved the war on terrorism, I don't think we will. That'll be my second piece of legislation. Put some tough language in there that there's no more hiding things from other agencies, and most importantly, make them share it with local law enforcement agencies like New York or Conway if they think there's a threat here.
Mr. Holmes.
You talked just a minute ago about getting small checks for your friends. How much do you think this race is going to cost in terms of your campaign and in terms of Mr. Berry's campaign? Should there be any limits, or should there be some reforms on campaign finance from your standpoint?
First of all, if I wanted to, I couldn't raise what Mr. Berry has raised. He has over $1 million, but I'm not going to sell the heart and soul of this district to big labor people and trial lawyers and greedy corporate executives. I'm probably going to run the most inexpensive race in the history of congressional races in Arkansas. But I'm glad, because it's forced me to go out throughout this district, knock on doors, go into coffee shops, walk the streets of the business district, and meet the people and listen to what they have to say. They don't know Marion Berry because, like I said earlier, if you're not rich or in a boardroom, they don't know who he is. When people ask me, what does Mr. Berry look like? He's been hiding all this time. It's a travesty. They're paying him $150,000 a year. I'll say this, if I'm elected, you'll see me a lot. You'll see me on the House floor fighting for you. You'll see me doing a lot of things, but I'm not even looking at money in this. Everybody's saying you're going to lose, you got to go out here and put these ads up. I hope I never see another political ad in my life. I am completely sick of watching. Nobody talks about what they're for, what they're going to do. It's the bad guy over here. Now, I can beat up on Mr. Berry because he could have been here tonight. There's no votes in Congress today. He could have rebutted what I said. And I stayed up to 3:30 this morning trying to figure out what opening and closing I would have. Is he going to be here? Is he not going to be here? But I'm talking to people what I stand for. I've been everywhere. I have not turned down one question. I've been in the black communities. I've been in all the communities saying, please help me. If you care about your country in this district, work with me. I just don't have any money. And the money I could have gotten, the big money, I turned it down. Strings attached to it. I'm not going to do that this time.
We are at the point in our broadcast where we thank our panelists for their questions. And with that, Mr. Robinson, you have 2 minutes, sir, for a concluding statement.
First of all, I want to thank the panelists. Those were very non-controversial questions, as usual. Let me close by saying this. I come from a family of public servants. My great-great-grandfather, whose picture still hangs on the wall of the courthouse in Lonoke, was a sheriff and a state representative. In my family, we had college professors, firemen, policemen, game wardens, public school teachers. I learned a valuable lesson as a young man. If you go into public service, you give it 110% every day, you be accessible, you understand that you work for the people and they don't work for you. When I was in Congress, on the Armed Services Committee, I was very active. I flew in a CIA helicopter, bullet-riddled, into the Contra camps along the Nicaraguan-Honduran border. I've been to Baghdad. On the Veterans Affairs Committee, I worked hard every day as a member of that committee because I was a U.S. Navy veteran. I cared about the veterans. I fought for more benefits. On the Education Committee, I worked hard to get more money for VOTEC schools, institutions of higher learning, public schools, because education is the real issue. I'm not going to hide if I'm elected, but we're going to address some other issues too. Prescription drugs, yes, they're important, but my opponents fail is the only issue. We have to talk about the economy. We've got to talk about what we're going to do about our schools. We've got to talk about job training. We must talk about and do something about the plight of minorities in this district. I'm a hands-on congressman. You'll find me, you call me, I'll call you back. I won't go on vacation like my opponent did 17 days after the terrorist attacks while they were still pulling bodies out of the burning rubble. A greedy corporate executive paid for him to go on vacation to Greenbrier, the luxury resort in West Virginia. Shocking to me. I want your vote. I want your help. I've been there. I've got a record. I'll stand up and fight for you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Robinson, again, thank you for your participation tonight. Again, a thanks to our panel of 3 journalists, to all of you here in the Donald W. Reynolds Performance Hall at the University of Central Arkansas, and of course to all of you at home, thank you for joining us and good night.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Election 2002, The Debates, is underwritten by AARP, the nation's leading organization for persons over 50, with more than 370,000 members in Arkansas.